Përshëndetje and welcome to Inside Albania with me, Alice Taylor. This week, Albania welcomed the British Foreign Secretary David Cameron. Now, he came here to talk about migration and organised crime and some other unpleasant things. So I decided not only to talk about that, but to invite two Albanians who are doing fantastic things in the UK to bring a bit of positivity to the discussion. I also went out of the studio to visit the Qafë Bari former prison camp. So you have that to look forward to as well. My first guest today is Andy Hojai, OBE. For those of you that don't know, an OBE is the second highest ranking that can be awarded to a person by the King, by the royal family of the United Kingdom. Now, this was announced at the end of 2023, but it was formalised by Prince William, the future King of England, very recently. Now, I'm proud to say Andy is a regular on the show, and I've invited him today for a slightly longer chat than usual to discuss several matters on the agenda. Andy, welcome to Inside Albania.
I'm delighted to be here, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Yes.
It's always a pleasure to have you, and especially under such exciting circumstances this time. Very recently, you received your OBE formally, so this was announced in the New Year's Honours List, and then you had a very lovely ceremony with Prince William as the future King of England. And this is, I mean, it's a great example of one of the many Albanians who've gone to the UK and made a positive difference to the country. How has the reaction been from Albanians in Albania to this very impressive news? And have you had any sort of congratulations from the government or any official figures?
The news has been very, very positive, and I'm sort of delighted for our community, although this is a personal honor, but I consider it as sort of a recognition for the positive impact that our community does in the UK. I've received a number of private messages, and the Albanian embassy in London hosted quite a lovely reception with a number of guests where we were not only celebrating sort of some of our achievement, but it was also a good opportunity for us to kind of discuss what can we do moving forwards in terms of deepening the ties, both academically, culturally, as well as in other fields. And that has been quite nice. But it's really good to be recognized. But equally, there are a number of challenges, and I think we can address them. And I think we are moving in sort of the right direction.
That actually brings me on to the next topic. David Cameron visited Tirana, and there were British flags everywhere. There was pictures of his face, you know, bigger, taller than me, hanging around. I mean, it was all very exciting. He met the Prime Minister. He was supposed to meet the President, but his visit was cut short. I think he spent about 2.5 hours in Tirana, and then he flew back to the UK due to developments in the UK, the calling of a general election for the start of July. Do you think this was an issue? Do you think it creates a bad sort of image in the context of rather complex UK and Albania relations? But I also want to ask you as well, the second part of the question, he talked about a decrease in the small boat crossings, which were an issue sort of 1.5 years, 2 years ago. Do you think this is due to work between the two governments, or a natural decrease because there's just not enough people to keep this going indefinitely?
So in terms of the first part of the question, I was personally and particularly delighted to see the Foreign Secretary visiting Albania, and Albania rightly put the red carpet and made quite a big deal out of it, as they usually do for a big visit in that magnitude. However, it's quite unfortunate that he had to cut the visit short, and I do know that there was over 3 weeks preparation for his visit, and he was supposed to not meet only with the president, but also with the NGOs, with civil society, media, and unfortunately, that has left a bit of a bad taste. I think the sort of general reaction also in the UK as well as in the Albania is that when it comes to the Western Balkans, sometimes these sort of things happen, because if we remember last time when the UK hosted the Western Balkan Summit in London, the Foreign Secretary at the time was Boris Johnson, but he decided to resign in the morning, and there were some Balkan leaders who were waiting for him to arrive. And when Theresa May, the prime minister at the time, was ushered in to welcome them. So I think that has left. On the other hand, take it with a light-hearted that these things sort of happen in a democracy, and unfortunately, there is a political crisis in the UK. It has been looming for quite some time, and everyone sort of was a bit surprised that Prime Minister Sunak called the general election yesterday, because he hasn't been able to command the majority within the Conservative Party in the last few weeks, especially being defeated in some of the bills that he put forward in the Commons. And it was not only David Cameron that was called back, but there were a number of ministers. When it comes to the second part of your question in terms of cutting the number of small boats and cooperation. Now, of course, there's not a clear methodology whether we can contribute and attribute it to the good relation, but it has definitely played a really important part.
We can expect, I think it's fair to say at the moment, that the government is probably going to change after July, how things appear to be lying at the moment. If there is a change of government from Conservative to Labour, can we expect any different approach to the relations with Albania and migration, or do you expect the same line to sort of continue?
I think it would be interesting to develop one thing I could say when it comes to the case of the UK, both the Conservative and the Labour. When it comes to Albania, they're pretty consistent in terms of the relation, that they have a positive attitude that we need to work with Albania. They do recognize that there is a large Albanian community in the UK, as well as their contribution. What we might see with the Labour government a shift of tone, where they will be more constructive. So far, they've seemed to be more constructive in that sense. The Labour Party generally has a really good relationship with Albania, and Albanians generally are supportive of the Labour Party. That's partially of the role that Tony Blair played when it comes to liberating Kosovo. But when it comes to the case of migration, there will not be much of a change, because if you see both plans, the Conservative and the Labour, in substance, they're very similar. However, the way that they're being presented and the way they're being talked about it is slightly different. So I would not see quite much of a change.
Now, I want to talk to you next about the proposed UK-Albania partnership between the School of Magistrates of Albania and the Judicial Office of England and Wales. Now, can you explain that to our viewers in a way which is a bit more accessible? What exactly is on the table here, and what solution is it providing?
So just to sort of take you a little bit back, when both prime ministers signed an agreement, at that time, we were invited to discuss a little bit what that agreement should be. Part of the recommendations that I proposed and a number of colleagues were to include an educational component where we can bring in more exchange of knowledge between different fields. And the best way forward that we can do it is to do it through education. And what we proposed in the table, this is one of the proposals, is to have an exchange between different professional schools in Albania, and that then can be expanded to university. Because we fundamentally believe if you have an exchange of practice, of best practice, you can actually break some of the culture barriers, but also some of the unconscious biases. Now, we well know that judges, prosecutors, police do have some culture biases when it comes to case law, that it's proven across the board, both in Albania, UK, and so on. But having those exchange will challenge some of those preconception as well as barriers. Now, what the substance of this sort of agreement that we have on the table, and this is one of those agreements, it's to provide an exchange between British judges and Albanian judges where they can share knowledge and best practice when it comes to case law. That will help, in particular, Albania to build its capacities when it comes to the rule of law and the judiciary, given that Albania has gone through a comprehensive vetting process, and it has a number of shortcomings. We hope then that sort of a program then can be expanded between the College of Policing in the UK and the Albania Security Academy, where we could also have that exchange of best practices through education. And that way we can build the knowledge, the capacity, but also to provide more exchange between people to people.
I also just wanted to ask your view on the vetting process. I've been following the vetting process since I came in 2017. And I mean, the amount of judges that have resigned or been fired is very high. I'm not sure of the exact percentage at the moment, but the backlog of cases, I mean, with the Constitutional Court, with the Appeals Court, is in the tens of thousands, if I'm not mistaken. It's significant. Do you see the vetting process as a success in this context, or do you think we need a few more years to really understand, you know, to get things in line and to be able to say, okay, we've made it out the other side?
Well, I think we have to see how do we measure success and what is, we do forget what were the criteria of the vetting process. So the criteria of the vetting process were to assess judges if they were corrupt or perceived to be corrupt or incompetent. Now, the general assumption was that about 30 to 32% were perceived as being either corrupt or incompetent. Now, the actual numbers show that 52% were kicked out because of these stringent criteria. So it was more than 25% which they had assumed. And that has created that sort of shortfall. Now, one could argue, well, this wasn't really a right approach to do it, because we could see that now the system, it's completely paralyzed because only 48% so far managed to go through the vetting process. On the other hand, do we really wanted them to be on board? Now, when it comes to these shortcomings, what I think Albania could have done better, and perhaps this is something that the EU should learn, because the EU at the moment has proposed a similar reform to Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, and we see their opinion by the Commission is actually mentioned that they should continue with their vetting process and develop a vetting process. What they should have done is that the School of Magistrates should have been the first one to reform, and should have been the first one to have the capacity to observe new students and put them through training so that could take those positions. Now, in Albania, we started straight away with the vetting process, and then now we see that for the system to be fully capable, again, we need 5 or 7 years to be filled of those processes. So I think we should leave it at time. I think it's going into the right direction. Again, depending which criteria you want to have a look at it. But if we go back to the criteria that were set out, it's kind of giving those results. However, the backlog, it is really problematic, and you have about 37,000 cases in the High Court, and on average, it will take at least 3.7 years for a case. And especially when it comes to cases on employment, it's just not acceptable, because if you are unfairly dismissed, you can only get about 6 months wages back. But if you're waiting 4 years, then what's the point? So a lot of people are kind of skipping that process.
Andy, thank you very much for all this information, and I wish you all the best. And I'm still waiting for you to come to Albania and have time to come to the studio in person.
Be delighted. Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you. Now, I also got to hear this week about an Albanian student attending school in the UK who has done spectacularly well in his studies. So, in the spirit of positivity, I decided to invite him to the show. Alion, welcome to Inside Albania. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, albeit virtually online.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, somebody told me that you have had some very good news recently. Now, you're studying in the UK, and I got to know that you received a reward at the House of Lords, which, for those who don't know, is the upper house of Parliament in the UK, for your academic results. So let's start at the beginning. How long have you been in the UK? What are you studying? What was this award? Tell me everything.
Yes, sure. So I've been in the UK for nearly 1.5 years. I came here in September of 2022. I studied for my A-levels here, but instead of doing 2 years, I only did 1 year, the final year of A-levels. And because it is called University Foundation Program, short for UFP, I thought that it might be a very good opportunity for me to get into maybe a top 5 or top 10 university in the UK. And as a result, I did very good with my exams and my lectures in maths, physics, and chemistry, where I got A stars in all 3 of those subjects. And thank you. And because my school where I studied was part of a program where there would be included 20 schools all over the UK. In all of these 20 schools, I got the award for the best UFP student.
Wow.
And there was an award ceremony in 23rd of April, so nearly a month ago, in the House of Lords. And for me, it was a privilege to be in the House of Lords for only a year, being here in the UK only by studying, not by politics. Right now, currently, I'm studying for mechanical engineering in the University of Bath.
Yes.
It's my first year, and right now I'm in a season of exams. I have 3 more exams to do.
Okay, so first, this award you received, you got the best score out of these schools in these subjects?
I am not aware of that, but there was some sort of committee that got the results from all the students that were the best in the UFP program. And they saw not only the academic achievements, but also the social aspect of how the students will interact with other students, with other peers, with their mentors, teachers, personal tutors, etc. And I was chosen to be the bearer of this award.
So not only did you get A stars in, which is, for those who don't know, is the absolute maximum grade you can get in 3 of the most difficult subjects you can study, in some of the most difficult exams, in some of the best schools in the UK, but they also said you're the nicest student out of all of the others. Basically, that's essentially what happened, yes?
Yes, so not only was I kind of nice, but I remember that last year I volunteered to teach my other peers for a whole week in mathematics because my teacher was absent that week, and
I heard about
that
this.
might have impacted as well.
I heard about this, that if a teacher is sort of sick or ill or unavailable, they ask you, a student, to step in and take over. I love this. This is brilliant. Well done.
Yes.
Well, I cannot emphasize enough. I did A-levels. A-levels are not easy. They are tough. In my time, we did AS levels in the first year and then A-levels in the second year. I don't know if it's still like that.
It's still the same, yes, AS and A-levels.
Yeah, they are really hard. I found them very difficult. Maths, physics and chemistry also were my worst subjects at school. In my GCSEs, I did very, very well in all the creative subjects, top marks in some of them, but almost failed maths, physics and chemistry. So I have even more admiration for what you've achieved. What's the reaction been in Albania from people back home? Have you had any public congratulations on this? What feedback have you had?
I've had congratulations of a lot. First of all, my parents, they were pretty happy, and my relatives here in the UK. But also when my former school, which I used to go here in Albania, they posted in social media that I was in the House of Lords and I got the achievement for the outstanding achievements in academics. I was contacted by pardon for not knowing the correct name, but I think it was some kind of forum or committee for the youth in Albania, and they wanted to meet me, but currently I think it's not available. I need to finish with my exams, and hopefully during the summer I will go and meet them.
Great. I wish you all the best in your exams. I'm going to send you the link to this when it's broadcast so we can share it far and wide so you get the recognition that you deserve. And good luck in your exams. And I hope we have another interview in the future so you can tell me about more of your successes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Best of luck and well done again.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
As I mentioned earlier, this week I ventured outside of the studio to visit the Qafë Bari former prison camp located in the north of Albania. This came from an invitation from local academics and historians as part of a project supported by the OSCE mission in Albania. We took a 6-hour drive into Pulka County to visit the prison. This is what happened. Welcome to Inside Albania. Now, I think to really go inside Albania, you have to understand what's happened in Albania's past, and that includes the almost 50 years of totalitarian communist rule. Now, throughout these years, Enver Hoxha, the dictator, built prisons and forced labour camps throughout the country where he sent all of the people that he thought were against him or that posed any kind of threat to him. During his reign of terror, thousands and thousands of people were put in these prisons and camps and sent into far-flung parts of the country to spend years and years toiling away in mines or paying for the supposed crimes that they had committed against him. Out of those thousands, thousands also died. They died from torture, from beatings, from starvation, from illness and sickness, and from the hard work that they were forced to do. Today, I'm at Qafë Bari. Now, we are somewhere in the middle of Pulka County, about 6 hours drive north of Tirana. Google Maps told us 3.5. But once you get off the main highway, it's a 2-hour drive through really rocky terrain, winding around the side of cliffs. Actually, my sports watch has told me I've done 20 kilometers today because the road is so bumpy. There's no phone signal. And we think that's remote by today's standards. But imagine 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when the camp was open and people who wanted to visit their loved ones here would have to walk on foot the 17 kilometers through the mountains in snow, wind and rain. But the reason I'm here today is because it is the anniversary of the revolt of Qafë Bari, where prisoners stood up against the regime and demanded better. There's a ceremony that's taking place. There are ex-prisoners and their family members here, and we're going to be speaking to them to find out a bit. Its neighbour and more well-known prison of Spach. Now, these people would be kept here in these rooms behind us. Here was where they would eat, where the kitchens were. Behind it, which is falling down, was the hospital area. And they were working in mines extracting copper and pyrite, and you can see those sort of in the distance behind us, although there are others dotted around the area. Now, this was back-breaking work. People were cutting out chunks of rock, moving them by hand. They had quotas to fill. If they didn't fill the quota, they could expect punishments. It was freezing cold. Even today in Tirana this morning, it was 23 degrees, but here it's cold. So imagine in the winter what the conditions were like here. There was no access to proper medicine or anything like that. One of the gentlemen who was speaking earlier, who we'll talk to in a minute, he was saying, you know, this wasn't just a labour camp, was a graveyard where people died. They died from beatings, they died from illness, they died from Thank you for the interview. First, can you your name and
My name is Etienne Fizlari. Call me Tom.
I will, Tom.
Tom.
First, can you explain a bit about the revolt that happened here? What happened and why did it happen?
About this camp?
Yes.
About this camp. Well, I think this camp is a micro Mauthausen for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't been in jail here, but my brother served so long here. And as far as I know from my brother's saying, there are a lot of graves around this area because anyone die, kill, or get hanged, no give to the family. Just put somewhere in the grave. We have tried, as a chairman of the persecuted people, to find the graves of these people, but unfortunately, we don't have much witness. And this, I think, is the government's fault, because if that happened 34 years ago, when Albania changed the rules, we could find everybody. Mm-hmm. But no one was interested in that, because the regime changed the name.
There was a revolt. The prisoners stood up against the regime. Why did they do this?
Look, when the people is happy to die and live in that conditions, I think they just give up life, because life was worse than living. Then they try to liberate themselves and the companions. But unfortunately, the police brutality, we arrest them, torture them, and on the end kill them.
Your brother, he was here for how many years?
He spent here only 7 months. And the rest I spent in Spach.
And what was his crime? What did he do to deserve that punishment?
He died when he got 60 years. He passed away because he suffered so much. He fell in jail when he was only 18 years old.
But why? For what reason?
Because the government, the police on the time accused him, tried to escape from Albania. That's all.
And that was enough to put him in prison for life?
They gave 13 years in prison. He served 13 years in prison.
And what happened to him afterwards? He was free afterwards? Pas just een weer is de leer?
It's a big story, unfortunately. We live in Australia for 49 years. When he left the prison, 1974, we tried to escape. Mm-hmm. On the end, we built a boat in our cities, a lake between Yugoslavia and Albania. Then the boat was not from timber, no, with a motor. It was just a piece of line. Yeah. Line, we just covered up that, and for 8 years we crossed the lake from one side to the other. 16 people.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's why we live in Australia.
And then you escaped and you ended up in Australia.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Including my brother, who served 30 years in prison.
Good, I'm happy for you. But you came back to Albania?
Well, I think it's unfortunate. I tried to help my country to invest here, but unfortunately, I feel ashamed to say I lost the love of my country, because still on the pair is communists.
So we're here today because it's the anniversary of the revolt that happened here. Can you quickly explain sort of what led to the revolt? Because from what I know of communist history, to do anything against the regime was sort of certain death. So what led people to think they had no other choice but to revolt?
Yeah, exactly. This revolt of this camp, labor camp and prison, mostly for political prisoners, but also for some other ordinary prisoners. Came 11 years later the revolt of the camp of Spaci. And in commemoration of that revolt, the revolt from Spaci prison in 1973 had a deep meaning, saying that, you know, we're already dead. We will live by dying as heroes. The requests of that revolt were Albania, like Europe, like the rest of Europe, we want democracy, we want, like it was, they were deeply not for conditions.
Yeah.
It was completely political in that sense, asking for freedom. They know perfectly that it wouldn't last. They knew perfectly that most of them would die, but it was like living by dying as heroes.
They had no other, they were going to die anyway.
They felt like that. And then 11 years later, conditions in this prison, which was opened in 1982.
At the end, when things
can you imagine?
Yeah.
So some prisoners were previously in Spac, and then like Mr. Bedri Bloshman, for example, and then came to this camp, which is even, it's now difficult to reach. Can you imagine how it used to be, you know? And conditions the same, of course. So they just wanted to revive that memory of living and resisting.
How bad was it here? What do we know from people who've survived here? Like, what were the conditions like? Were they tortured as well? How bad?
Absolutely. Torture was part of their daily life. Like proper torture, we as the Institute of Study of Communist Crimes and Consequences, we are making a compilation of memories plus documents about torture. So, and I'm just writing on that now in these days. And like torture and mistreatment, it's difficult to say when one, where one starts and ends and starts the other.
We're talking, I mean, in specifics, people were beaten, isolation. Absolutely. What other specific examples of torture were there here?
So by beating, mean horrible kind of beating was like daily. That was daily routine, you know. For example, bad feeding. Like they had to work 12 hours in the mine, but by having very bad food, you know, like people would even starve or die by starvation, you know. So that's kind of mistreatment, torture in the between, you can't say the gray area, you know. But also other tortures were like specifically tortures, isolating people for months in the water. For example, you have the cell with cold water all the time, and by having your leg there all the time. Other kind of torture, again with water, for example, was that you make the drop of water in your
forehead.
Yeah, you know, but like for hours, and you would just go crazy. Or by electroshock, but not with electric, but by the phone. You put them and it makes the in your ears for 3 minutes. You would go crazy. Like such things, they were mostly daily.
Yes. Wow. And the people that were in charge of this camp, the people who worked here, who were guards, who were officers, have any of them faced any consequences?
Absolutely not, with exception of Edward Zaya, was the one in the prison, one of the worst torturers ever. Edmund Zaya. He, when he migrated to Germany, and then some former political prisoners opened a request to German state to persecute, to you know, judge him, extradite and make a case out of such person. And it's not the case, it's not over yet. I think they are somewhere and probably will be the first and the last from these officers and torturers of the regime. Otherwise, the other people just, you know, have a normal life.
Taking a state pension.
Taking state pension and also going to the media and telling how it was, you know, to be a torturer or whatever, you know, like Cemal Lame or other members.
That's all for this week. You can follow Inside Albania on our YouTube channel, Euronews Albania, on our TV channel, Euronews Albania, and on all major podcasting platforms. You can follow me on X and Instagram, Alice in Albania, for updates on the show. Until next time, Mirë Pafshim.